joining now? Okay, perfect. Well, let's go ahead and get started then. I know we're 5 minutes in, so we only have folks like Larry until 11 o'clock, so. So I think, Sonia, if you can go to the next slide. And good morning, everyone. So it's great to be back with all of you it's actually the first time this year. We haven't met since December, so it's kind of good to see everyone virtually again. Hope you were all able to enjoy a little bit of downtime over the holidays. And I guess I feel like everybody here probably already knows me, but just in case we do have any new folks or folks from the public joining, I'm Erin Beck for Mayor Ginther's office, and I'm our sustainability liaison, and have been working closely on our aggregation work, which is why I'm here with all of you today for our aggregation advisory group. But we've all made it through to 2021, and just wanted to quickly say, we're really excited here at the city and in the mayor's office to have, a new president and administration at the federal level, which I'm mentioning because, the reason we're all here today is to talk about clean energy. And, there's been a really strong and clear commitment from the new administration to addressing climate change, reducing emissions, and transitioning to clean energy in an inclusive way. So it's really great and exciting to have partners who are in alignment with what we're trying to do here locally and trying to accomplish, and who can really help provide possibly even greater opportunity for larger impact. But again, we do have a lot to get through today, so I'm going to hand things over to Sonia.
Thank you, Erin. At this point, just wanted to remind folks, well, as everyone is, I think, doing quite well, mute yourself while when you're not speaking. A reminder for anyone who has not renamed themselves with their org. I think most folks have, which is just helpful for a reference. And a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the Sustainable Columbus website. And I don't think we have folks from the public on right now, but if they were, they would be welcome to join in on questions. All right, and I will hand it over to Elena.
Thanks, Sonia. Good morning, everyone. As Erin mentioned, we're very excited to connect with you today. It seems like it's been an awfully long time since we've all been together in a virtual room. Wanted to just kind of go through our run of show to let you know what to expect we'll be discussing. First, we want to begin with some exciting announcements and introduce some office changes that are happening at the City of Columbus. Then we want to spend some time updating you on our progress between December and now to establish our community choice aggregation, which is critical to moving the work forward. Want to then take a step back and give you an opportunity to recall what we talked about in December, since it has been a bit of time, and then share scoping updates and get your thoughts and reactions to kind of the path forward that we see for ourselves as we continue to scope out community choice aggregation programming. So with that, I'd like to, introduce you all. Most of you already know him, to Brian Clark. Brian is or has joined our Department of Public Utilities as a deputy director, and part of his extensive portfolio of work is leading our citywide sustainability initiatives, which includes Sustainable Columbus, our community choice aggregation work, and really basically all interdepartmental coordination and citywide coordination on sustainability work. So we're really excited to have Brian take on this role and help to lead us. Brian has extensive experience, as you all know, both on the policy side with his background working in the mayor's office, but also has a history of sustainability and environmental work, which I know we all really appreciate and think will be a real asset to our team. So want everyone to welcome Brian to the group.
Hello, Mr. Brian.
Welcome, Brian. All right. Great. So now I think Erin, yeah, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Elena, for introducing Brian. We definitely are excited to have him back in as part of the team and working on these efforts. So really excited, like Elena was saying, to have his expertise and strategic thinking on everything. So just like Elena was sharing, we wanted to start off with some updates on the steps and processes that have happened to establish the aggregation program. So I think if we go to the next slide. We are very excited to share that the City of Columbus is officially certified by the PUCO as a government aggregator. So that is an exciting step forward in this process. It might not sound like the most exciting or glamorous to have a certificate from the state recognizing this, but it really is a big deal because it's really signifying everything we had to do to get to this point. Probably most significantly, of course, was going to the ballot and getting voter approval to actually move forward with this program. You know, we worked on that governance and operations plan with Trey Bell and held the public hearings and got that whole application filed. And so we did get that authorization and certificate. I think it was about in the middle of January. So, but also very importantly, it really allows the city to receive real data from the utility about our residents and who's eligible to participate in the program. So kind of previous to this, we've just been doing our best, and with Trey Bell and AEP's expertise have had, you know, pretty good estimates of what we think is of who's going to be eligible, but now we can get into that real data and just start to get more granular about that. And then just would note the certification is good for 2 years, but after that, it's really just a renewal. And next, we are going to share some reminders about the renewable energy mix that we're looking at for the aggregation program and some updates on the MSA negotiations. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Frank with AEP.
Right as you said that, my internet started to get a little sketchy. So is everybody there?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So just a recap of where we stand relative to the assets that will serve this. We've had extensive conversations with Trey Bell and the city about the mix of both the RECs from the initial term to a hybrid of RECs and assets, ultimately to our aspirational goal of full 100% renewable assets serving the load in the third period and then sustained out through the term of the agreement. AEP Energy Partners, one of our subsidiaries, is in deep negotiations with developers across the state of Ohio, and the talks are going very well. For this aggregation, we initially anticipated that was going to be about 1.7 terawatt hours of usage. And as we've worked with the data team for both Trey Bell and our internal team, it's now shaking out to around 2 terawatt hours, which is outstanding. So that's more, it's just a better footprint of sustainable energy across the board. As far as the capacity goes, meaning the amount of energy that we're going to have to procure, we're going to need around 700 megawatts, and we're in discussions of attaining over 2,000 just to make sure that we've got this and other renewable projects well served. We have 4 deals that are completed or close to being completed, 2 of which have been publicly announced. And then we have several more in the pipeline. And that's pretty much the update there. I don't know if Scott Belcastro or Erin, if you have anything you want to add.
I don't know if you can hear me, but not at this time. We're good. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a quick question. I'm sorry, Frank. When you say you're in conversations with developers, do you mean for the RECs or for the later generation?
For the assets.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
No worries.
Thanks. I think we hand it now over to Scott to talk further about the master service agreement.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. At least for me, it is. I'm out here in California today, so good thing about working remote, you can pretty much handle everything anywhere. So The MSA, we've been working super hard on this agreement with AEP and the city. It's been extremely time consuming, but I think we've hammered out almost everything to the end here. There were some other items that we're just cleaning up at this point, but wanted to clarify that the terms are a 1-year bridge rec period, a 2-year rec period with the IRE assets. I call it a hybrid, and then we go into the 10 remaining years. So it's a 13-year program. The only thing I wanted to highlight in this slide here was simply the last time we talked, we were thinking of a 2-year, 1-year as the process rolls out, meaning 2 years, then potential 1 year, and then we move it, then go into the assets, the IRE product. We just felt that this was going to give us a little more flexibility, and so we just flipped the 1 year to being the first year, then it goes into the 2 year. And I think it also helps us get to that point where, as AEP is rolling in their assets, as Frank has already mentioned, we can start to include those. Some of the important things that we've come up with here, we just wanted to clarify that this product, because of the way the PUCO requires, be called a variable rate product. It is truly a 13 1-year fixed rate. So it's 13 1-year fixed rate increments or terms. We're not allowed to use the word fixed rate. So when folks get the opt-out letters, it will be called a variable rate product, even though the rate will be fixed for 1 year at a time. So if anybody asks, hey, is this a variable rate? It's not variable rate in the sense of month to month, it's variable rate in a year to year. So prior to the annual rate change, the city will sit down with AEP Energy and have discussions about how the rate would change. And we'll be coming to some consensus on that. And then AEP will issue a final statement of the actual rate. And I believe that we have plans with the city to make this information available through different channels, one of which is primarily the website. This new agreement, the master service agreement, includes provisions for the hiring of new employees. There is and always has been the provision that the call center hire new employees. And I believe most recently, in my absence, AEP has been working with the city to get the additional workforce development created. And I think, Frank, you may be able to speak to that a little bit further here. But for now, I just want you guys to know that there will be some other workforce development features included in the MSA. I think we've already talked about the RECs will come from a number of sources, both national and regional, with a preference. And I'll just say that the preference is being more Ohio or Ohio regional. Just if you had surrounding states, those are also considered for all purposes Ohio region. And they are a little more expensive, so we'll have to find some nice balance between a good rate and meeting this the REC requirement of being more localized. And I just also wanted to highlight in this agreement, if you start reading it and you're caught off guard, that the PPAs are in the name of AEP EP, and so they're going to be also a signer on this agreement. So it's AEP Energy, and it will be AEP EP Energy Partners. The energy partners they're the ones signing all the PPA agreements, power purchase agreements, with the solar installers. And so if you see that name on this agreement, it's a good thing that they're on there. And since they are the ones entering into the agreements with the solar installers. I'm going to go to the next slide. If there are no questions, go ahead. I wanted to just highlight here again, the gray line kind of highlights just a variable rate that goes up and down throughout the year, pardon me. And I just did it in a more controlled manner. It could be just a big squiggly line that's very chaotic. The 0.055 rate is kind of a fixed rate. It's obviously flat. It would be flat for the entire term. And then you can see the stair steps, which represents what we're doing, is more of for every 12 months, it's fixed. And so our rate also is a variable. As you can see, I've made it go up and down, but those horizontal lines of blue mean that it's fixed for those 12 months. If you could get to that next slide, I think we have to refer to this as well. So budget billing, these are just two more remaining items that are in the contract of the MSA. And consolidated billing will be, as always, just everyone, this is one statement that comes from AEP Energy, and the charges through this aggregation will show up on your bill. The residents only need to pay, as they've always done, one single person. That's our company, that's AEP Ohio. And then AEP Ohio will pay AEP Energy. AEP Energy has also set up to offer budget billing to residential customers, which is consistent with the terms, conditions, and calculation of the EDU budget billing. The reason that's important is because in the past, we find that sometimes suppliers build their budget billing in a not so advantageous way for residents. But in this case, they will be doing it consistent with how AEP Ohio does it. And so this will help smooth out your bill. If any of your residents or people that you know need a consistent payment every single month, this is the way to do it. It smooths out. If you go back one slide, please, Sonia, or whoever's in control of this. Instead of for budget billing, think of it as that orange line versus the the other lines that we have here. So it just takes your monthly payment and smooths it out. All right, I think this is my handoff. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Erin.
Thanks, Scott and Frank, for kind of those great overviews of where we are, just reminding us about the renewable energy mix. And, I know we had a couple questions there, so I'm sure we're going to do questions here in just a minute. But just wanted to remind folks of the timeline that we're looking at. We are still on track to have the aggregation program starting in June of this year. So I think that's kind of a big marker. And then in between then, certainly January, February, we're still in the supply agreement negotiations. We're having our advisory group meeting here today. We are looking to get that MSA all approved and kind of wrapped up in the next couple of weeks. And so that would be early March that will be kind of approved by the city. And then we'll meet again as an aggregation or as an advisory group in April. So we can definitely talk about more details of the MSA, more of, probably the pricing for the first year. We'll continue to keep talking about the community grant programming, but also things I think we can meet about and speak about, is the website for the aggregation program, who to contact, want to make sure that everybody, knows those things, looking at and reviewing the opt-out letters that are going to go out, getting a little more granular on when residents can expect that. Those are all things I think we'll talk about as a group when we're meeting in April and May. And then certainly looking beyond June when the program starts. So the program will start in June, but then our residents would actually start to see it reflected on their bills starting in July. And then certainly looking beyond that, we'll start to see the renewable energy projects coming online in the next couple of years. And then certainly the aggregation supported community programs will start to launch as well, because we'll start having the community grant funds flowing in. And then I think with that, I'm handing it back over to Sonia.
Thank you, Erin. So this is our our pause and get any questions that we haven't picked up on this process so far. We'll be getting, as Elena mentioned, we'll be getting much more into the details around sort of the community programming aspect and the timeline and all of that coming up. But anything else on the sort of the just basic setup of the program right now?
This is Elder Larry Price, and I apologize. I've got to jump off and get on 11 o'clock Zoom. But question. I signed up for it. I've been getting a lot of letters from a lot of different entities. How do you know which one to stay on to sign up with, not to sign up with? So it's a little confusing. So if it's confusing to me, it's got to be confusing to a lot of people. So is there a city one, or
what did you sign up for, Elder Price?
You caught me off guard. It was a couple of weeks ago. To be honest, I thought it was the cities, some that I signed up, but I've been getting letters from other entities about it. So I'm a little confused.
Mr. Price, this is pretty typical when we see when we roll out programs. I mean, not only do suppliers in general typically send out a lot of aggressive letters regularly, but whenever there's an aggregation rolled out, typically at the outset or 6 months ahead of time, people know it's coming. So you're going to get a lot more letters, everyone, in the mail, aggressively pursuing you. Number one, as a recommendation to you, is get on the phone as soon as you can and speak with that supplier to make sure that you ask them to send you back to the utility. To answer your question more directly, the letter will come from in an envelope, and it's called an opt-out letter. It gives you 21 days to review it. It will come in an envelope that's with a logo from the city on it, and it will say electric aggregation information enclosed. That's a regulatory requirement on that. And so you're going to want to look for that specific letter. I'm sure that we're going to be making an announcement that those letters will be going out. And if you see anything other than that, it's probably not the city. It's the city's program.
Well, I would suggest, and again, I apologize, I definitely got to jump off, but I would suggest we figure out something, because if it's confusing to me, it's got to be confusing. People are signing up, not knowing what they're signing up with. And I was specifically looking for something from the city. So we might want to look at some kind of outreach in terms of how to inform people that is the city's one that they should be looking for, not these other entities, letters that are coming. So just a suggestion. All right, thanks again, Erin. Keep me posted.
If you need help getting out of that deal, let me know. We'll assist you. My office will help you, navigate that. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Erin, there's a question from Kathy Cowan-Beckert relative to Senate Bill 52. If you want, I can offer some feedback on this.
Sure. Feel free.
So Senate Bill 52 was introduced. It's a state bill. Scott Belcastro and I and our external affairs team have been on top of this. Essentially, what it does is it puts extreme restrictions on new development of renewable assets into the state of Ohio, and that's at a very high level. What we've engaged on our end internally within AEP is we have an external affairs team that regularly meets with legislators, that takes the temperature of a given bill and helps understand what the likelihood of it going forward is. There is a large group of both non-governmental organizations, business groups, communities, the county commissioners of Ohio that have all lined up against this bill. It is certainly not dead, but it has some significant challenges in front of it. And the senator that is leading the charge on this has an agenda, obviously, but I think we're optimistic that the bill isn't going to go forward in its current state simply because there's just too many entities lined up against it. It would significantly inhibit renewable growth. And to Erin's point, while we are in a Republican-led state, we nationally there is going to be a renewed focus on renewables. So it's cautious optimism, Kathy, that we're going to be fine. There was another bill, while we're speaking to legislative issues, that was also working to eliminate opt-out aggregations such as this. That bill is practically dead on arrival. It didn't go anywhere. But usually when we get asked about one, I get asked about the other. And I just want the group to know that AEP External Affairs has been engaged, and we are in close talks with them. We're in close talks with the Sarah and the I knew I was going to do this. OEC, Ohio Environmental Council. Thank you. Wait, that's what happens when you turn 53. Sorry, guys. Green Energy Ohio and other organizations. So it's a collaborative effort to make sure that this bill doesn't inhibit projects such as this.
Thank you, Frank. Well, unless there are any other questions, I think we can move on into talking a little bit more about the community programming side of things. And can I turn it over, to Elena?
Yeah, so everyone, I have a couple slides here just to refresh everybody's recollection on what we talked about in December. So last fall, we had a series of meetings, right, really starting in October, where we started to ask you questions and understand a little bit better from you all where you thought we should prioritize our CCA-funded programs. And what we heard from you was that there's a strong interest in energy efficiency across the board, including residential, low-income, multifamily, and small business. We also heard that it was important to think about how we can finance and fund these initiatives beyond just thinking about the community grant, right? How can we leverage what's coming in through the community grant to create larger opportunities for funding and financing in our community? I'll go ahead and advance, Sonia. And we also shared with you that we were beginning the process for peer-to-peer conversations. So we know that we are lucky not to have to reinvent the wheel here in Columbus, that there are many other cities who are focused on energy efficiency and are focused on really that nexus of energy efficiency and equity in their communities. So we shared with you that we had connected with the city of Cincinnati to learn more about their Warm Up Cincy program. We shared with you that we had connected with the city of Minneapolis to learn a little bit more about their home energy squad. And we shared that we have plans to continue to explore with other cities like Chicago, San Jose, and St. Paul, all of which have strong programs. And so, you know, our next step in that process was really to lean on our American Cities Climate Challenge partners to help us support scoping efforts to take the knowledge, you know, that we shared out with you in December to kind of dig deeper into our scoping, which we're going to share with you today. Here's that title slide. So we're going to begin to talk to you guys and share our scoping updates. I'm going to turn it over to Erin to really talk about our goals. And these are really our North Stars that are helping us to align in our efforts. But, you know, just want to mention, you know, we're taking you guys through this process with us. So I know this is going to look and feel a little bit different than often, you know, when you're engaging with the city and the city is saying, hey, this is our plan. I think what you're going to see today is that there's a lot of openness to hearing from you and getting some feedback as we continue to scope out these programs. Erin?
Yeah, thanks, Elena. Just like Elena was saying, you know, these are kind of our North Star goals that we just wanted to have in mind as we're discussing all of the programming. So first, of course, we want to ensure that anything we're doing is supporting the Climate Action Plan goal of reducing residential energy consumption 10% by 2030. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we're impacting our most vulnerable residents and really supporting low-income homes who need access to this kind of programming. And then last but not least, of course, kind of a big one is we want to include a workforce development component. So as we're making this transition to clean energy, really focusing on energy efficiency and emissions reduction work, how can we continue to build a local diverse pipeline into these good paying jobs of the future? And so I think if we go to the next slide. So yeah, just like Elena was saying, as together, we've really narrowed in on 4 pillars that we believe are going to support these goals. And with all of the supports and resources we have with us through the climate challenge, we're really looking at the near-term opportunity to build out on one of those programs. So I just want to be clear too, that does not mean that the others won't happen or that they won't be a priority, but we just want to use the resources that we have now to really help us focus in and build out on one program area. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Elena.
What I love about that visual too is these are like these big meaty pillars, right? These are not like, small and narrow pillars. It's a solid foundation that we're trying to grow in this energy efficiency space. So last October, we talked to you all, like I mentioned, about what are the priority areas that we should spend time scoping out and thinking a little bit more about using community choice aggregation, community grant funds for. And, what we heard from you is there were really 6 areas that you elevated as areas of priority for us. And those are listed here on the screen. And they fall, we'll go into deeper detail about each one of them, but, they fall in the category of, like Erin mentioned, energy efficiency, workforce development, financing. And then we also heard, that renewable energy, just like it's important to kind of the core of this program, bringing it to residents via programs like solarized programs are really critical. As we've begun to really think about these programs and scope them out is, you want to put everything in a neat box and a neat pillar, but they really are not, they don't always fit nicely in their box, right? I keep trying to put them in and they keep kind of coming out because they're not always just distinct categories, right? When you start to talk about implementation assistance for energy efficiency programs, you really can't talk about that without in the same breath talking about, well, what was the assessment that got me to the place where we're able to provide implementation assistance? Similarly, when you talk about deploying these programs, you can't not think about the who will be deploying these programs, which really means workforce development ends up kind of getting embedded in each one of these programs, just as funding and financing does. So just kind of want to express a recognition of the fact that all of these things are interrelated. And so while for clarity in communications today, we do talk about these 4 pillars, they really end up becoming an overall foundation of the program that you kind of, they're not as distinct as one might kind of initially think they are. So digging a little deeper into implementation assistance, wanted to share with you today, we spent some time after our December meeting really doing what, you would expect, sitting down and thinking about the who, what, where, when, why of implementation assistance. And so just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page, when we mean implementation assistance, we mean you have either had an assessment done on your home or, have knowledge of what needs to be done in your home in some way. And now it's time to actually take the action. In energy efficiency, in the energy efficiency space, we often say install the measures, right? So, that might be installing small measures like LED light bulbs, weather stripping, high efficiency shower heads. It might be larger measures like installing installation in a home or insulation. Installing installation wouldn't do much. Installing insulation in a home, right? And so these are the kind of measures that we're talking about when we talk about implementation assistance. And you really helped us to identify that donut that we've talked about before, right? Which is, you know, there are folks who are able to qualify for full home weatherization and are able to have implementation assistance provided to them either by the state or through utility funded programs or both. And then there are folks that are able to afford this work, right, who get an energy audit and who say, okay, this is valuable to me. I see the cost return. I have the money in my bank account. I will install the insulation right now. And then there are a lot of people in our community who fit in that in between, right, who are not income qualified, but still would benefit from the measures, but don't have, you know, on hand money to be able to install the measures themselves. You know, some of the key questions, and this is by no means the exhaustive list of the key questions that we are working through or want to try to find answers to is, you know, what types of incentives should be offered and for what types of implementation. And this kind of goes back as well to, you know, the conversation we had about peer learning from other cities. Is we've learned that the stack is really important in this work, right? Is that the city has to be conscious and our community partners need to be conscious about what programs already exist and what types of incentives and programs would make most sense for the target populations and households that we're trying to reach. And similarly, you know, Erin mentioned our North Star goal is a 10% reduction in energy use from residences by 2030. And so, you know, we've recognized that we need to really get an understanding of how many households does that mean that we need to reach and what types of upgrades. Because we want to design programming that makes a measurable impact for us, right? It might not get us all the way to that 10%, but we want it to get us further along than, you know, than just kind of nibbling around the edges of the 10%. And then similar to the stack that I just mentioned, you know, are there funding and financing programs that might help us to leverage? And generally, how much does implementation assistance cost, right? And so these are the questions that we're working to answer. I am not here today with answers to those questions. It's more, as I mentioned, kind of just share out with you what we're wrestling with and to give you guys an opportunity to help us issue identify where there might be resources for this information. And so what we have done is we've created a Google Sheet. Is that the right terminology for it, Sonia? That Sonia will drop in the chat to kind of start to get you guys to help us crowdsource who should we be looking to answer some of these questions, or do you know some of the answers to these questions already? Have I done justice to the Google Sheet, Sonia?
Yes, the link that Jenna just dropped in the chat essentially captures each of the 4 ideas that that Elena's walking through right now and some of the key questions. It has some spots for folks to jot down notes because we know that any one of these topics could be kind of a full discussion, and we'll have some time for discussion here in 20 minutes or so, but want to make sure that as things are popping up, you have a spot to jot them down. So click that link, let me know if you have any access issues and we can sort those out.
Yeah. So this is, you know, this is so this is the first area where you guys had really prioritized. This is really important for us to think about. And, you know, I think we all understand why this is critical. Is this is where the actual savings happen, right? This is where people are actually doing something that leads to energy efficiency improvements in homes, which leads to reduction in energy costs at the individual level, but also at the, you know, community level leads to greenhouse gas emission reductions. So if we want to move on to B, and I'm sorry I'm taking this so slowly, but I want to make sure we all kind of have a landscape so that when we start to get into our next piece of where the city is going, you can kind of see how we think this process will evolve. So the next, this next category actually comes chronologically before the first category, right? And so sometimes my brain has a little bit of a hard time remembering that. But assessments, typically come before installation of measures. And so, we had some questions for ourselves about, assessments. It's sometimes very difficult to know what measures should be installed in a home unless you have assessed a home. So we asked our partners, with the American Cities Climate Challenge to help us think this through. And we're also, thinking through what audits are most cost effective to get basic information. And our partners at RMI and WRI have helped us to kind of understand that there are traditionally 3 different types of home audits that are conducted. There are either home audits that are conducted to the Building Performance Institute standards, ResNet audits, which are Residential Energy Services Network audits, and then there are Home Energy Score audits, which are kind of an audit that was developed by DOE, which is a slightly lighter touch audit. But those are generally, when people are auditing their homes, they're either auditing to one of those 3 kind of audit standards. It is important that folks be trained on how to audit, right? From my perspective, one of the questions I asked really early on is, can we kind of just get people to know basically enough to get into some homes and do some assessments? Do you really need a professional or a well-trained force to do this stuff? And what we've learned from partners at WRI and RMI is it is really critical that you have some folks that are in that, more professional capacity who really know the basics of home energy auditing, because you need to, while you want to have a quick audit, an audit that only takes about an hour, it still needs to be thorough, and it needs to capture enough about the home and the home envelope to be successful. So can volunteers and university students be trained to provide basic assessments? What we're learning is yes, but again, it really becomes that combination of having folks that can do the more certified audits and also having volunteers, university students and others that can help with, the lighter audits to provide some basics in a home. And what we still want to explore with you all is what role existing providers could play in this work, like our partners at MORPC and Impact who are on the phone. And then, need to continue to explore how much it will cost. We understand, again, kind of from a national landscape, these kinds of audits typically cost between $207 and $680 per audit. So the national average kind of comes out to be $450. But we haven't done a localized analysis of what an assessment might cost in our community. And so, as I mentioned when I started out, what we've really discovered in the journey on workforce-oriented program development is that this is very much going to be something that we nest within programming, that it doesn't exist by itself, right? It exists within programs. And so, what types of jobs, where the focus should be, and how much of this is economic development versus, kind of the business recruitment side of things versus, homegrown job creation is really, I think, going to depend on the programming and how we establish that programming. But those are the questions that we're asking ourselves. And then lastly, like we mentioned before, financing and leveraging and, expanding the pot of money is very important, because this work, there is so much need in this area, right? And so while we know that the community grant funding will be helpful to moving projects forward, we know that it in and of itself will not be enough to do all of the things that we would like to accomplish to meet our economic recovery goals, our climate goals, our resilience goals. And so we've been spending time understanding, what types of funding and financing options exist out there. And this is, again, by no extent an exclusive list of what types of funding and financing options are available. But our, understanding is, generally there are things like loan loss reserves, loan loss reserves, green banks, and cities using their bonding authority to advance clean energy initiatives. So with loan loss reserves, those are basically where a loan loss reserve holds public funds in reserve to cover potential losses that loan providers may incur if a customer defaults on a loan. So basically the city helps to take out some of the perceived risk of loaning money to folks that may not be as creditworthy as the financial institution would typically loan to. Green banks are a much more complex type of organization, right? They're a dedicated finance institution. There are 14 US states and localities that have green banks. And, they typically focus on underserved markets. But they're complex, long-term process to stand up, not the type of thing that you create overnight, because you have to make sure there's enough interest in these kinds of deals to really create that kind of dedicated finance institution that I mentioned. And then lastly, bonding authority, public entities can allocate capital to loan programs through a variety of vehicles, including bonds. And so this is something else that, we're looking at. So, we're early in this process. We need to kind of understand and think about what are the trade-offs of these and other various options that might exist out there. So again, hoping that you'll help us source other kind of ideas or options that you know of that we should be looking into. What is also swirling around in our mind is who should be the intended recipients of this funding? Should it be residents, small businesses, larger businesses? Is there a way to layer or match donations from other entities to kind of, again, kind of expand the opportunity here? And should other financial institutions be involved, and if so, whom? So with that, I think that is, sorry for kind of the slow plod through this, but we wanted to make sure we transparently we're letting you all know kind of what we're thinking of. And while it is a little scary to say we do not know all of the answers to these things, really ask you to help us to start to think through, can you help us answer some of these questions or connect us to folks that can answer some of these questions so we continue to move the ball forward in scoping some of these things.
Thanks, Elena. All right, so that was a lot. So we just covered a lot of material here. We wanted to give folks 5 minutes, and again, we're gonna transition to talking about kind of the process that we're going through to refine and kind of come up with next steps for answering all of those questions. So more on that in a moment, but wanted to just take 5 minutes while this material is fresh and redirect, call your attention again to the link that Jenna dropped in the chat, which maybe we can drop in again so it's fresh for folks, and just take a few minutes to add either thoughts on, as Elena said, sort of who else the city should be reaching out to. Are there particular examples, peer examples, resources, initial thoughts that you have related to some of these specific ideas, so we can make sure to capture those. And I think you'll all show up anonymously in the sheet. So if you want to like add your name to a comment so the city can follow up later, please feel free to do that. So maybe we'll just take till 11:30 or so to give folks a breather to digest.
Elena and Sonia, are we able to share this? So I know Robert from Morpsey is really the one who should be looking at this and providing feedback. Is that possible? Is that okay?
Yes, we can, when we send out, I can't remember exactly, Jenna and Sonia, what we do after these meetings, what we send out afterwards, but we can send out the link afterwards.
Fantastic, thank you.
We'll come fully back in 4 minutes now. See a lot of great ideas and input going into that sheet there. So thanks to everyone for taking a little time, and we'll get into more discussion shortly. Can I turn it over to Elena? I believe you are.
Yeah, so next step, like Tanya mentioned, is really thinking through, so these are all we shared with you kind of some, but certainly not all of the questions that we need to kind of answer. But next is really sharing out the process through which we plan to move forward, right? There's always the risk of analysis paralysis in any one of these things. And we are in the fortunate position right now in the next 5 months to have climate challenge support to help us scope out this work and one of these options. So as Erin mentioned at the top of the meeting, we really want to do that. We really want to take advantage of the opportunity that we have right now as part of our participation in the American Cities Climate Challenge to begin to deeply scope out one program, recognizing that that doesn't mean that we're not moving forward with other programs and scoping out those other programs. But we are going to put some significant focus on scoping out one program between now and June so that we have that ready to deploy. Or we feel like we have all the answers that we need to be able to deploy that program. So one of the things that has come up in our meetings as we've talked with our technical supporters through the climate challenges, you're not alone, like I mentioned before. There are other cities that have come before you who have thought about these things and who have completed programs on kind of a spectrum of work, right? And so that's what this slide illustrates is, you know, there's options kind of throughout the spectrum that we could think about, right? Is do we leverage existing WEP programs, weatherization programs, the state weatherization programs that providers like Impact, MORPC, and Ground Level Solutions provide within our community? Do we do something like Cincinnati did where we create tenant-focused programming? Or do we, you know, do something like the City of New York has done with their Energy Fit program? And then there was another program that was provided to us that was, I guess, a TVA pilot that was done that was kind of an extreme makeover style program. And while I love the title of that program, it was maybe not as efficient as the type of program that we would be looking at creating. So as we've kind of been thinking about the depth of energy efficiency programming, we're starting to hone in on this idea that we really like the standardized retrofit program focused on similarly owned homes that Energy Fit in New York City did and can describe that a little bit more. It's an interesting program that relies on, you know, doing a certain amount of sampling of homes and then moving forward with installing measures in homes so that, you know, every home may not have an individualized audit completed or might have a light audit completed, but we're able to standardize and say all homes in this area built by this developer have enough similarity that we feel comfortable that installing these measures will move it forward. So it really becomes a hybrid of the two, A and B, that I discussed with you earlier, where there's a certain amount of assessment that needs to be done, that we need to do so we understand homes in certain areas before we move forward with an installation of measures. So I present that just to kind of let that sit in your mind, right? That is kind of where we're leaning for this first initial program development that we would be looking to the challenge to help us support. But it is just kind of the initial seed of a conversation. Really, then, you know, we have to start a process of data gathering, stakeholder discussions, proposed program development, and refined program development to get ourselves to a place where we create something that works for the City of Columbus, that works for our community, that works with our partners, right? And so right now we are in the data gathering process. So the information that you provided us today in the spreadsheet certainly helps us as part of that data gathering process, but we're also going through and doing individual interviews with stakeholders to understand their existing programming Beth and I did one of these with our teams on Tuesday to start to understand, what impact knows about the communities that they serve and what energy efficiency programs impact is currently deploying in the community. But we plan to have similar conversations with MORPC and others. I think we've got a list that'll come up on another slide. But we know that we have to make sure, while we don't want to go into analysis paralysis, we know we've got some really critical data that we have to gather and stakeholder discussions that kind of have to happen in an iterative format so that by April, we can get to a place where we've got a proposed program development and 2 to 3 potential design concepts that we can bring to you all and to others to kind of test what your thoughts are and what you like and what you don't like about potential program design. So we're really at the very beginning of the scoping process. And, honestly, the decision might be TBD in every category in many ways. We are leaning toward a single family program just because looking at building stock, starting to have initial conversations with our building and zoning department, there seems to be a high area of need in those single family homes, and our multifamily, especially our larger multifamily homes, end up kind of more being grouped and categorized in energy efficiency programs that may fit better with the commercial energy efficiency programming that, Jenna Topaldi and others have been working through with our building owners and operators as part of our building performance advisory group. But you can see here, we're still really starting to think through, should it be deep energy efficiency program in a smaller number of homes versus, broad programming? Who's the right person to administer the program? These programs are generally administered by partners, right? They're partners that are already deploying in the community in other cities. And the city's role is best spent, helping to advise and set contours and work as part of the team, but they're not the ones who are actually in homes deploying. And then, what's the appropriate duration of programs like this? If we're trying to get to a 10% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, how do we set ourselves up for success in a program that's longer term than a couple of years, right? So those are kind of some of the key program design parameters that we're still working to determine, that really go, when you look at that last slide back in the process slide, they go into stage 1 and stage 2 of that process slide, right? Is after we get a little bit more data gathering, have a few more stakeholder discussions, we'll be able to analyze the pros and cons and have a better sense of what our proposed program development will be for you. I'm sorry you guys have to hear me talk so much today. I really tried hard to give as many slides to Erin as possible. So exploring linkages with other programs, as I mentioned, we've started this process. We still have a lot more conversations that we need to have. But again, what we'd like to hear from you today is, are we missing anyone in the stakeholder conversations? We know we need to talk to Impact, MORPC, and Ground Level Solutions because they're the existing providers that are providing weatherization programming in our community. Talking to Beth on Tuesday, we learned that Honeywell would be an important additional stakeholder to talk to because they work on a program that's called the EPP program that targets high energy homes or high energy intensity use homes in our community. We know that we need to talk to our 2 existing utilities. I think someone mentioned that in the chat, which is really critical. We have a good sense of the programs that they offer, especially Columbia Gas. They've got, they have a history of doing their Warm Choice program. I think it's almost a history of 3 decades worth of work as part of their Warm Choice program, but, need to talk a little bit more with AEP Ohio about, the current filing that they have at PUCO and what they expect they'll be able to fund or might be able to fund depending on PUCO's approval of their voluntary energy efficiency portfolio. And as I mentioned, we're lucky, as a city, we have a lot of really great data that's either provided through our buildings department or the Franklin County Auditor. So we want to gain a little bit better understanding of the vintage of the homes in our community, when they were built, what kinds of systems they might have. And then GreenLink Analytics is a climate challenge partner who we have some questions for. They have been working with similar data to the data that MORPC has worked with as part of the Franklin County Energy Study to start to put together, I think, a little bit more granular information across climate challenge cities of energy burden and energy poverty in communities. And we hope to kind of mine that a little bit to see, can we dig deeper beyond kind of the 6 neighborhoods that we know have a high energy burden to get a little bit more granular information on that. So I think the question for the group, Sonia, is, are we missing anyone? We surely are.
So this is Mark. Just as a question, I used to have one of those, well, I guess we all have a bunch of smart meters from AEP, but the service where you could see your own home consumption's gone away, which is a shame. But, is there any way of mining that data to help guide you to, the places that are in most need, whether or not the residents knows? I'm sure there's some, privacy things around that, but, they would compare my home to the neighbor's home, and, it's got incredible information that would help, be a much more of a targeted approach.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mark. And that's, I think, a good question that we could be asking AEP Ohio is, even, if that data isn't still streaming, is there historic data that they would feel comfortable, or aggregated data that they would feel comfortable providing to us?
Yeah, so they're still collecting it. It's just you can't see it as you can't see your own home, but they're still collecting all that because the meters are still there.
Yeah. So it's a great point. Historically, it's been difficult. Obviously the utilities have to worry about confidential personal information, and so it's all about kind of figuring out the level of aggregated data that we could get, and if it can get discrete enough to at least show us neighborhoods or ideally streets where there's more of a need. Good idea.
Other thoughts from folks on particular other groups or programs to be connecting with?
This is Kathy, and I put this in the chat, but the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy is kind of the go-to national group for energy efficiency. They have tons of resources. I'm not sure of anything specific there, but can poke around there and see if I can find anything else.
Be great, Kathy. I know that the ACEEE is a climate challenge partner as well, so good to note that they might have some good resources.
So I think we can move into sort of a more general discussion beyond just some of the specific sort of program types to reach out to. We have at least the next 10 or just close to the hour. If there's anything else, other reactions that folks have about any of the program types that that Elena shared, and really want to, I think, get a sense of how folks want to remain involved as this program continues to take shape over the next several months. And Elena or Erin, if there's anything else you want to frame up around that. Elena, you appear to be unmuted. I can't hear you. I don't know if others can't hear
Sorry,
you.
it's the double mute.
Okay.
Caught me. I was just going to say, this is, our intent is to provide a little bit of an open forum. I know we've presented out a lot to you all today, and we just want to kind of hear your thoughts, anything you'd like to share about the program types, like Sonia said, we discussed, or just initial reactions to the information. We know it's a lot to unpack, and there'll be more opportunities to discuss, but wanted to get some initial thoughts.
So I actually kind of had a question. Mark, I just wasn't sure what you were referring to when you said people can't really see their energy consumption anymore. I don't know if I just missed something, or I guess I just wanted clarity on that, because I was like, I know I still get the emails from AEP that kind of tell me how well I'm doing that month for my energy use, or if I'm on track to be like above it or below it.
Well, they had a product that you could install in your house.
Gotcha.
It was called an energy bridge, and the funding was provided, the PUCO had granted them to use it. And I can't remember the name of the company whose technology, but originally it was going to expire at the end of November, and they extended it to, I think, the end of December or January, and it's now no longer operational. But part of the reason I say it is, we've been deeply involved in the digital divide. And, we're working on these pilots in the neighborhoods, and we've looked at, literally down to the parcel level of where the kids are. So, we've got a map from Columbus City Schools, so we know the addresses. The Department of Technology has, produced great maps. And, to your point, I'm sure there's some issues about getting individual houses' energy consumption. I mean, I can see that being an issue, but the way we've visualized this, it's really easy to see where you should go focus. And, when you think about these energy efficiency programs, if you're relying on somebody to put their hand up and they may not know they have a problem, then you're not really hitting it, perhaps your greatest need. And if there was a way to mine that data, at a level that would be acceptable, I get that, could really help us. There could be a block of homes that were just poorly constructed or insulated, and they could all be, 20 homes in a row for all we know. I just think it would be a super great way to, really go after the problem.
So can you guys hear me? I'm getting a warning saying my mic isn't working.
Yeah, we hear you fine.
Okay, good. So Erin, you're talking about two different products. So Mark's right, there was an app, phone for reference, that took the data, that was actually a Wi-Fi bridge that would take the data out of the meter and via Wi-Fi put it into the app, and you could track it on a real-time basis, hour by hour throughout the day. That has gone away. The other product that you're referring to, the letter, that's actually a third party. And I'm not going to bash my brethren, but it's essentially a marketing tool. And the data, we've kind of questioned it a little bit because inevitably I would take, well, I live out in the country now, but when I lived in Dublin, I'd grab my neighbors, and whoever had the letter was the most egregious energy user in the neighborhood. So we would compare notes and say, well, it says I'm the worst in the neighborhood. And it said, no, it says she's the worst in the neighborhood. No, it says he's the worst in the neighborhood. So I don't know. I think it's a little suspect, but what Mark is talking about was actual data coming from your smart meter going electronically into the app.
Gotcha. No, that's helpful.
And,
Yeah, I
and
just
Frank,
wasn't sure. I was like, I still get the little emails with the smiley face or the frowny.
but the point is AEP still gets that data. You just can't see it as a consumer. So, right?
I don't know, Mark. Honestly, I don't. This is again one of those things where the regulated utility has to be careful what they share with the
Sure.
deregulated side, and I don't know that they do. I mean, I honestly don't. There are billing components that all the competitive retail suppliers have tried to work with the utility on that haven't been able to do. I'm not going to get into the weeds here, but we haven't been able to do it because they didn't have the real-time data, is what we've been told by the utility. And they didn't tell AEP Energy, they told all of the competitive retail suppliers that were asking. So I don't know that it's being captured. Maybe it is, but for the indication that they've given us to us is that it isn't.
On a different note, I have a suggestion of who to talk to, either via Honeywell or via the state. The EPP program is for people who use 5,000 kilowatt hours of energy or more per year. But the state, through data mining, somehow gives that list of customers to Honeywell. So it's a very targeted list. They would be a great list of people to talk to about what's going on energy usage in their house, because they're very high burden households. So somehow in talking with Honeywell or in the state, if you could do a data sharing agreement and talk to people on that list, I think that would provide some really interesting information.
And Beth brings up a really good point. Just to benchmark a little bit, we count an average residential account is going to be between 800 and 1,200 kilowatt hours a month. So if you can imagine on scale, 5,000 is just through the roof.
Last call for additional input, thoughts on any of the ideas presented so far, any of the questions posed, pieces on process or anything else.
Well, I guess I'm still alive. I guess I would share one more from the digital divide work. We're working on a longer term strategy, and we're essentially working through an affordability index. Again, because you're largely aimed at low income, with these programs, and you really can't get everywhere. And what we're working on, the digital divide, is essentially it becomes unaffordable at low income when it consumes more than 1% of your income to have high-speed internet, for distance learning, telehealth, or whatever. And I wonder if there's a similar index you could generate, that would say, okay, this energy bill as a percent of income, becomes unaffordable, and help. To me, it's all about how do you prioritize where you go, those with the greatest need or those with the greatest inefficiencies. And I just think there's ways you can get at the data that would be different than just relying on people to come forward who may not know, may not really be focused on it. So that would be my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mark. That's really helpful. I wonder if it might be that you've just volunteered yourself to be on the list of stakeholders to reach out to, because whether or not it's the exact same, learning the methodology that you're using to do that analysis would, I think, be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Orth, Director Orth, and I are like joined at the hip working on this, and Sam's got all the GIS information down to the parcel track, connected to the auditor's office. So I mean, the view from the city that the city can gain is really phenomenal. I can't get
really
to
good
it.
To hear.
As a private person, I can't get to it, but we're working on this together, and of course, it's a city project, so there's some real great resources. Sam will probably kill me for, dragging him into this, but.
So I thought the recent MORPC energy study, and obviously John Paul wrote most of it, so he's going to know a lot more about it than I do, but I thought that it talked about 6 or 8 neighborhoods in Columbus with high energy burdens, and exactly how high they are, and how the average energy bill is about 3.5% of income. In some of these neighborhoods, it's up to 11% of income people are spending on energy.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if we have that report, I'm not aware of it, but that would be great.
Yeah, thank you guys. Yes, that exists. John Paul did an amazing job. First of its kind study. Use it every day, promote it. I think, what John Paul and I have talked about, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, John Paul, is you're always hoping for more discrete information, right? Because the more targeted information you can get, the better you can design your programs. And right now we're really at, I think, the zip code level. And then we had to kind of make some assumptions about, well, this neighborhood is generally this zip code. But if you want to weigh in, John Paul, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So we have it at the zip code level. That certainly helps for targeting, but there can be significant variation within the zip code. So you might have a zip code such as that encompasses Hilltop, where it might be 7 or 8% energy burden, but within that, you might see some residents who have a 30% energy burden. I mean, it varies widely. We of course had to look at it on average because that's what we could handle. But if we can get down deeper, that's where we're going to start to see a real impact, at least on the community level. As far as energy savings themselves, these might not be the big fish out there. Certainly, houses that qualify for the EPP program are going to see those larger savings. But if we're looking for kind of like those double benefits where we're really having an impact within the community, perhaps targeting in those particular zip codes might be the best way to go.
Thanks, John Paul. All right. In our last couple minutes, I just wanted to give Erin a chance to wrap us up and remind folks about the timeline and some of the next steps here.
Sure. Thanks, Sonia. Yeah, so really great discussion today. And like I think Elena and Sonia said, I know we covered a lot, but please just wanted to reiterate, please reach out to us anytime if there's anything you have questions on or want more information on. And of course, we are going to be meeting again in April. And just again, here's a timeline reminder of kind of the big items that are coming up, really hammering out and getting finished up on that supply agreement is the next big step. And then opt-out letters that will be coming in May and going out to residents, and then really getting the program started in June. Those are kind of the big ones I think that we have coming up. I think if we go, I think that is pretty much it. I think the next slide, yes, kind of reminds us of where we are today. And then, like I said, we'll have our 7th meeting coming up in April. We'll talk again about community grant funding programming, but also again, like I was saying earlier, I think that's also a chance for us to revisit the MSA and kind of narrow in on some of the details of that, as well as, website for the aggregation program. Who should residents be contacting if they have questions about the program or, want to opt out later on down the road? Just anything like that. Want to make sure that it's clear to this group in case you get questions from folks. And again, I envision us also looking at the opt-out letter and, being able to give more details on when residents can expect that to come, which we already started to hear a little bit of questions, I think, on that today. People are getting letters and we want to mitigate any confusion as much as possible. But I think that is pretty much all I had. And it's 11:59, so we did really well on time.
Well done. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Erin and Elena, and we'll see everyone in April.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
So much, guys. Bye.